They called her Martha. To the doctors at St. Jude's Hospital, she was just the slow, invisible woman who changed bedpans and never complained. For 20 years, she was the person you looked past. But on the night of her retirement, amidst a torrential storm that cut the power lines, the staff of St. Jude's found out that Martha didn't exist. When the doors were kicked in by armed mercenaries, the trembling old woman didn't hide. She hunted, and when the Navy SEALs finally breached the room, they didn't rescue her. They saluted her. This is the true story of the most dangerous night in nursing history. The clock on the wall of the break room buzzed with an irritating electric hum, reading 10:45 p.m. It was a Tuesday in November 2014. Outside, the weather in rural Oregon was apocalyptic. Rain lashed against the glass of St. Jude's Medical Center like handfuls of gravel, and the wind howled around the corners of the aging brick building. Martha Sterling sat at the small, chipped laminate table, staring at a cup of lukewarm tea. She was 64 years old, with grey hair pulled back into a severe, practical bun, and a face mapped with the kind of wrinkles that usually suggest a life of knitting and baking cookies. Her scrubs, a faded shade of periwinkle blue, hung loosely on her frame. "You okay, Martha?" Martha looked up. It was Sarah Mitchell, a 24-year-old RN who had only been on the floor for 6 months. Sarah was bright-eyed, overly optimistic, and the only person in the entire hospital who remembered that tonight was Martha's last shift. "I'm fine, dear," Martha said, her voice soft and raspy, like dry leaves. "Just thinking. About retirement." Sarah smiled, grabbing a yogurt from the fridge. "Florida, right? You said something about a condo in Boca." Martha offered a polite, thin smile. "Something like that. Warm weather. No stairs. I can't imagine this place without you." Sarah sighed, sitting opposite her. "I mean, I know Dr. Alston yells a lot and the pay is garbage, but you're the only one who knows how to calm down the psych patients in bed 4. You have that touch. It's just patience, Sarah. People just want to be heard," Martha said, taking a sip of the terrible tea. The door to the break room swung open, banging against the wall. Dr. Greg Alston strode in. He was 30-something, handsome, in a conventional way, and burdened with an ego that barely fit through the door frame. He was looking at a chart, frowning. "Martha, why is room 304's IV bag empty? I ordered a saline flush 20 minutes ago." Alston barked, not even looking at her. "I replaced it 5 minutes ago, doctor," Martha said, her voice remaining perfectly level. "Check the line. The clamp was stuck. I fixed that too." Alston paused, checked the time on the chart, and scoffed. "Well, check it again, and get the spill in the hallway. Someone dropped a catheter tray." He turned and left without a thank you. Sarah rolled her eyes so hard it looked painful. "I hate him. I literally hate him. It's your last night, Martha. He should be buying you a cake, not ordering you to mop floors." "It's fine." Martha stood up, her joints popping audibly. "Egos are fragile things, Sarah. It's best not to step on them." Martha walked out into the corridor. The hospital was quiet, save for the rhythmic beeping of monitors and the relentless storm outside. She moved with a slow, shuffling gait that she had perfected over the last 15 years. Head down, shoulders slumped, the posture of the defeated. She grabbed the mop bucket from the utility closet. As she squeezed the water out, she caught her reflection in the darkened window of the nursery. For a split second, the slump disappeared. Her spine straightened, her chin lifted, and her eyes, usually a watery, vague blue, sharpened into steel. She checked her watch. Not the cheap plastic one on her wrist, but the internal clock in her head. 2,300 hours. 1 hour left. She had been Martha Sterling for 15 years. Before that, she was redacted. Before that, she was a ghost. She just had to make it 60 more minutes without the past catching up. But as she pushed the mop across the linoleum, the lights overhead flickered. Once. Twice. Then a low, ominous boom of thunder shook the floorboards. The automatic doors at the main entrance slid open with a hiss. A gust of cold, wet wind blew into the lobby, scattering papers from the reception desk. Martha stopped mopping. She didn't look up immediately. She listened. Steps, heavy boots, wet rubber soles on tile. Not an emergency rush, not a patient in distress. Controlled steps, heel to toe. Tactical. Martha squeezed the mop handle. The wood creaked. They found me. She thought the realization hitting her not with fear, but with a cold, exhausting acceptance. I didn't make it to midnight. Martha didn't turn around. She continued the rhythmic motion of the mop, moving the grey water back and forth, but her senses shifted into a mode she hadn't used since the operation in Belgrade in '98. She counted the footsteps. 3 men. No 4. 2 heavy, 2 lighter. "We need a doctor," a voice boomed, deep accented. Eastern European, no South African. Mercenary. Dr. Alston came out from the nurse's station, adjusting his stethoscope, looking annoyed at the draft. "This is an emergency room, not a shelter from the rain. Check in at the desk." Martha turned, slowly playing the role of the curious old lady. Standing in the lobby were 4 men. They were dressed in dark rain gear, soaked through. They looked like hikers or hunters, but they stood wrong. They stood in a perimeter formation. 2 watching the doors, 1 focused on the doctor, 1 scanning the cameras. The man in the center, the speaker, was holding his side. Blood was mixing with the rainwater, dripping onto the pristine floor Martha had just cleaned. "I said," the man growled, stepping forward, "we need a doctor. Now. No records. No cops." Alston froze. He was a bully to nurses, but a coward in the face of actual aggression. We can't treat without admission forms. It's protocol." The man in the center pulled back his jacket. He wasn't showing a wound. He was showing a suppressed HKUSP .45 pistol tucked into his waistband. "Fuck your protocol." Sarah, who was standing behind the reception desk, let out a small gasp. The sound drew the eyes of the man closest to the door. He turned his gaze predatory. "Lock the doors," the leader commanded. "Nobody leaves. Nobody calls out." Martha watched as the man by the door pulled a sign from his jacket, "Closed for maintenance," slapped it on the glass, and manually engaged the deadbolts. He then pulled a jagged military-grade knife and severed the telephone line running up the wall near the entrance. "Cell phones," the leader barked. "Everyone in the pile now." There were only about 12 people in the ER lobby. A few sick locals. A mother with a feverish child, Alston, Sarah, and Martha. Trembling, they began placing their phones on the reception desk. Martha shuffled forward. She reached into her pocket and pulled out an old flip phone. She placed it on the pile. As she did, she looked at the leader's neck. A tattoo. A black scorpion with a red tail half hidden by his collar. The Visser Group. Private military contractors. Dirty work for dictators. They weren't here for her. They were here because a deal went bad and they needed a patch-up. But Martha knew the Visser Group. They didn't leave witnesses. Once the bullet was out and the wound stitched everyone in this room, Sarah, the arrogant Dr. Alston, the child with the fever, would be executed. It was their standard operating procedure. Clean sweep. Martha shuffled back to her mop bucket. "Hey, old woman," the leader shouted at her. "Get over here. Sit on the floor with the rest." Martha looked at him, blinking confusedly behind her glasses. I just need to put the mop away, sir. Safety hazard. Sit down, he screamed, pulling the gun fully out. Okay, she stammered, raising her hands. She shuffled toward the group of hostages, huddled near the waiting room chairs. She sat next to Sarah, who was shaking uncontrollably. Martha, Sarah whispered, tears streaming down her face. They have guns. Shh, Martha whispered, reaching into her pocket and squeezing Sarah's hand. It's going to be all right. Just look at the floor. Don't make eye contact. Martha scanned the room. 4 hostiles. Hostile 1 leader injured, left flank. Pistol. Hostile 2, door MP5, submachine gun under his coat. Big guy. Hostile 3, hallway shotgun. Pacing. Hostile 4, roaming erratic, probably high on adrenaline. She looked at the clock. 11:15 p.m. Police response time, in this weather, in this rural county, was 40 minutes minimum if someone managed to call. But the lines were cut. The cell towers were likely jammed or simply out of range in the storm. She was unarmed. She was geriatric. She had arthritis in her left knee. But she also knew the anatomy of the human throat better than any surgeon in the building. You. The leader pointed the gun at Dr. Alston. Fix me. In there. He pointed to trauma room 1. I need a nurse. Alston stammered, his face pale as a sheet. I can't do it alone. The leader scanned the room. His eyes passed over Sarah. Young. Pretty. A distraction. Her. He pointed at Sarah. Sarah whimpered. No, please. Get up. The leader cocked the weapon. Martha stood up. Her knees creaked. She's an intern, Martha said. Her voice wasn't the raspy whisper anymore. It was clearer. She faints at the sight of blood. She'll be useless to you. The leader turned his cold eyes to Martha. And you are. I've been a trauma nurse for 40 years. Martha lied she'd been a nurse for 15 and a killer for 20 before that. I can stitch you up before she even finds the gloves. Let the girl stay. The leader looked at Sarah, who was hyperventilating, then at Martha, who stood perfectly still. Fine, he spat. Grandma comes. But if you shake, I shoot you in the face. Martha nodded. I don't shake. She followed them into trauma room 1. As she passed the supply cart, her hand brushed against it. In a motion too fast for the human eye to track in the dim light, she palmed a 10 cubic centimeter syringe and a vial of succinylcholine, a paralytic agent used for intubation. She slid it into her sleeve. Shift's not over yet, she thought. Trauma room 1 was a sterile white box. The storm hammered against the small high window. Doctor, Alston was shaking so hard he dropped the scissors twice. Useless! The leader shouted, backhanding Alston across the face. The doctor crumpled to the corner, sobbing. The mercenary sat on the edge of the gurney, gripping his side. You do it! He snarled at Martha. Martha approached him. She moved with a strange, fluid grace now. The shuffle was gone. Let me see the wound, she said calmly. He lifted his shirt. It was a jagged tear, likely from a ricochet. Painful bleeding, heavily but not fatal. I need to clean it, Martha said. It's going to burn. She grabbed a bottle of iodine. Just do it, the man grunted. Hostile 4 was standing by the door, watching them. His weapon, a sawed-off shotgun, hanging loosely by his side. He was bored. That was good. Bored men make mistakes. Martha poured the iodine. The leader hissed through his teeth. Dr. Alston. Martha said, not looking back. Get me the suture kit and the lidocaine. Alston was useless, curled in a ball. I'll get it, Hostile 4 muttered, annoyed. He stepped toward the cabinets. No, Martha said sharply. You don't know where it is. Stay there. I'll get it. She turned to the cabinet. Her back was to the leader. She quickly prepped the syringe she had stolen. 10 cubic centimeters of succinylcholine, a lethal dose if not ventilated immediately. It paralyzed the diaphragm. He would suffocate while fully conscious. She grabbed the suture kit and turned back. "Okay," she said. "I'm going to numb the area." She held up a syringe, the legitimate lidocaine one. "Don't try anything funny, Grandma," the leader growled. "I just want to go home and feed my cat." Martha said, her face the picture of innocence. She leaned in. She injected the lidocaine around the wound. The leader relaxed slightly as the pain dulled. "You're good," he muttered. "Better than that crying doctor." "I've seen a lot," Martha murmured. She began to stitch. 1 stitch. 2. She needed a distraction to take out the guard at the door. "Dr. Alston," she said firmly, "I need you to hold pressure. Now." Alston didn't move. "Get up!" Martha roared. The volume and command in her voice were so shocking that Alston scrambled to his feet out of pure reflex. Even the mercenaries jumped. Alston came over trembling hands, pressing on the gauze. "Good," Martha whispered. She looked at the guard by the door. "Sir, I need more gauze. Top shelf. Please, unless you want him to bleed out on the floor." The guard rolled his eyes and reached up to the high shelf. His jacket lifted, exposing his ribs. Martha didn't hesitate. She grabbed the heavy metal oxygen tank standing next to the gurney. In one motion, she swung it. It wasn't a clumsy swing. It was a calculated kinetic strike. The steel tank connected with the guard's temple with a sickening crack. He dropped like a stone unconscious before he hit the floor. The leader roared, reaching for his gun on the tray. Martha spun. She didn't go for the gun. She jammed the hidden syringe of succinylcholine directly into the leader's jugular vein and depressed the plunger. "What?" He started to scream, but the word turned into a gurgle. His hands flew to his throat. His eyes went wide. The paralysis hit him in seconds. His gun clattered to the floor. He tried to inhale, but his lungs wouldn't obey. He stared at Martha in sheer frozen terror. Martha leaned close to his ear, her voice dropping to a chilly whisper. "My name is Agent 702, but you can call me Mom." She watched the light fade from his panicked eyes as he passed out from hypoxia. Dr. Alston was staring at her, his mouth agape. "Martha, what? What did you do?" Martha picked up the guard's shotgun. She checked the chamber. Loaded. She turned to Alston. The sweet grandmother was gone. In her place was a predator. "Greg," she said, using his first name for the first time in 5 years. "Listen to me very carefully. We are compromised. There are 3 more hostiles outside. I am going to kill them. You are going to barricade this door and keep your mouth shut. Do you understand? Do you understand?" "Yes," he squeaked. "Good." Martha cracked her neck. "Stay here." She moved to the door shotgun, held in a low ready position. She paused, listening. 2 down, 2 to go. And then she heard it. The sound of a helicopter fighting the wind outside. Not a medevac. A Black Hawk. The Visser group had backup coming, or... Martha narrowed her eyes. Or someone else had been invited to the party. Martha stepped out of Trauma Room 1. The hallway was plunged into near darkness. The storm had finally knocked out the main grid, and the hospital was now running on emergency backup generators. Red emergency lights bathed the linoleum in the color of dried blood. She held the pump-action shotgun tight against her shoulder, the stock pressed into the hollow she'd bruised 1,000 times in training ranges back in Virginia. She didn't look like a nurse anymore. The stoop was gone. She moved with the rolling gait of an operator, knees bent, center of gravity, low weapon leading her eyes. She checked the corridor. Empty. The break room was 20 feet away. The lobby where Sarah and the hostages were was around the corner past the nurse's station. 2 hostiles left, she reminded herself. 1 heavy at the door. 1 roamer. She heard footsteps crunching on broken glass near the pharmacy. That would be the roamer. He was looking for drugs, oxyfentanyl, anything to take the edge off. Mercenaries like the Visser group were disciplined in battle, but undisciplined in downtime. That was their weakness. Martha slipped into the shadows of the linen closet. She left the door cracked a fraction of an inch. She waited. Patience was a weapon she had mastered while lying in the mud of Eastern Europe for 3 days, waiting for a target in '89. The roamer, a man named Lewis, she'd heard the others call him, that walked past. He was jittery. His flashlight beam danced erratically over the walls. He was muttering to himself, his weapon, a compact submachine gun, hanging loosely by the strap. Martha let him pass. Then she made a sound. Click. It was the sound of a pen dropping. Lewis spun around, flashlight sweeping the empty hall. "Who's there?" Silence. Only the hum of the generator and the rain. "I said, who is there?" Lewis shouted, his voice cracking. He walked back toward the linen closet. Martha held her breath. She didn't have the element of surprise if he sprayed the room with bullets. She needed him close. Lewis reached the door. He kicked it open. His flashlight beam hit the shelves of towels. Empty. "Damn rats," he muttered, turning away. Martha dropped from the top shelf. She hadn't been hiding behind the door. She had climbed the shelving unit, bracing herself against the ceiling tiles, despite the screaming protest of her arthritic joints. She landed on him like a falling gargoyle. Her legs wrapped around his torso, and before he could scream, she drove the butt of the shotgun into the base of his skull. Thud. Lewis collapsed. Martha rolled off him, breathing hard. Her hip flared with sharp, hot pain. "I'm getting too old for this," she grimaced. She checked his pulse. Strong, but he was out cold. She zip-tied his hands with a plastic restraint. She pulled from her pocket, always prepared, and dragged him into the closet. She took his radio. It crackled. "Lewis, check in. What was that noise?" It was the heavy at the door. "Kovich." Martha stared at the radio. She couldn't speak. Her voice wouldn't match. She clicked the transmit button twice. Click, click. "Lewis." She clicked it again. Click, click. Universal code for acknowledged or all clear in some units, but also a sign of radio failure in others. She was betting on confusion. "Idiot!" Kovich's voice came through. "Get back to the lobby. The chopper is 2 minutes out. We extract the boss and we burn the building." Martha's blood ran cold. Burn the building. That was the plan. No witnesses. They were going to torch St. Jude's with everyone inside. She checked her ammo. 4 shells in the shotgun. She had to move. But as she stepped out of the closet, the emergency lights flickered and died completely. The generator had stalled. Total darkness. Martha smiled in the pitch black. For 20 years she had been a nurse. She knew every squeaky floorboard, every sharp corner, every obstruction in this hospital. Kovich was a stranger in the dark. Martha was home. She moved toward the lobby not as a soldier but as a ghost. She trailed her hand along the wall, counting the doors by touch. Room 302. Room 301. Pediatrics. She stopped at pediatrics. She grabbed a handful of marbles from a jar on the counter, a prize jar for brave kids. She reached the corner of the hallway leading to the lobby. She could see the faint glow of the exit signs ahead. Kovich was standing there, silhouetted against the glass doors. He was massive. He held an assault rifle scanning the darkness. "Boss!" Kovich shouted into the gloom. "Lewis!" Martha threw the marbles. They clattered loudly down the hallway to her left, towards the cafeteria. Kovich spun, raising his rifle. He fired a 3-round burst at the sound. Bang, bang, bang. The muzzle flash illuminated the lobby like a strobe light. In that split second of light, the hostages screamed. Sarah was huddled on the floor, covering her head. Kovic moved toward the noise. "Come out!" Martha stepped into the hallway behind him. "Put it down," she said. Her voice was calm, authoritative. The voice of a head nurse scolding a disorderly. Kovic spun around. He couldn't see her, but he knew where the voice came from. He raised his rifle. Martha didn't wait. She racked the shotgun. Tsk, tsk. The sound was unmistakable. It is the universal language of, "It's over." "You can't hit what you can't see," Martha said from the dark. "I have night vision, old woman." Kovic sneered, tapping his goggles. He leveled the rifle. Martha froze. She hadn't seen the NVGs. He could see her perfectly. A 64-year-old woman in scrubs, holding a shotgun. "Goodbye, Grandma," Kovic whispered. Crash. The glass of the main entrance exploded inward, not from a bullet, from a flashbang grenade. The world turned white. The sound was deafening, a concussive thump that sucked the air out of the room. Martha squeezed her eyes shut and opened her mouth instantly, reflexive training to equalize pressure and save her eardrums. Kovic, wearing night vision goggles, was blinded instantly. The flash was magnified 1,000 times by his optics. He screamed, tearing the goggles off his face, firing his rifle blindly into the ceiling. "Down, everyone, down!" Martha roared, diving over the reception desk to cover Sarah. Sarah was sobbing, curled in a ball. Martha pressed her body over the young nurse, shielding her from the falling glass and debris. "Stay down, Sarah." "Don't look up," Martha commanded. The front doors were gone. In the swirling mist of the rain, and the smoke from the grenade shapes moved. They didn't walk, they flowed. Black uniforms, fast helmets, suppressed carbines with infrared lasers cutting through the smoke like red lightsabers. These weren't police. They weren't SWAT. They were Tier 1 operators. Kovic, still blinded and disoriented, staggered back trying to reload his weapon. "Contact front," one of the shadows yelled. 3 suppressed shots rang out. Fut, 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 controlled, precise. Kovic's chest erupted. He dropped backward over a row of waiting room chairs, dead before he hit the ground. Clear left. Clear right. Hallway secure. The voices were clipped, professional, and terrifyingly efficient. Martha stayed behind the desk, her hand on Sarah's back. She felt the adrenaline dumping out of her system, leaving her shaking. She knew who this was. The pacing, the gear, the aggression. DevGru. SEAL Team 6. "Identify." A voice barked from the center of the room. A tall figure stepped through the smoke, scanning the room with his weapon. He saw the hostages huddled on the floor. "Civilians secure," the operator said into his comms. "Where is the HVT?" Martha slowly stood up from behind the desk. She kept her hands' visible palms open. She had left the shotgun on the floor. The lasers immediately snapped to her chest. 4 red dots danced on her faded blue scrubs. "Don't shoot!" Sarah screamed, jumping up beside Martha. "She's just a nurse. Don't shoot her!" The lead operator held up a fist. The team froze. He walked forward, his boots crunching on the glass. He was huge, dressed in full tactical kit face, covered by a ballistic mask. He stopped 3 feet from Martha. He looked at the dead mercenary on the floor. Then he looked at the unconscious mercenaries that his team was dragging out of the hallway, Lewis and the trauma room, the leader. He looked at the zip ties on Lewis, professional grade. He looked at the IV line in the leader's neck, a precise paralytic dose. He looked at Martha. "You did this," the operator asked, his voice modulated by his mask. Martha straightened her scrubs. She brushed a piece of glass off her shoulder. "They were rude," Martha said simply. "And they didn't have insurance." The operator paused. He tilted his head slightly. He reached up and unclipped his mask, pulling it down. Underneath was a face hardened by war, with a scar running through his eyebrow. He looked to be in his late 30s. He stared at Martha. His eyes widened in recognition. "Identify yourself," he said, though his tone had shifted from command to curiosity. "I am the charge nurse for this shift," Martha said. "And my shift ended 45 minutes ago. I would like to go home." The operator didn't move. "Ma'am, is your name Martha Sterling?" "That is the name on my badge, yes." And before that, Martha sighed. The ghost of her past was fully in the room now. "Before that," she said softly, "I was designated Nightingale, JSOC, Task Force Orange." The room went silent. The other operators lowered their weapons slightly. Sarah looked at Martha, her mouth hanging open. "Task Force what?" The lead operator lowered his weapon completely. He let it hang by the sling. He snapped his heels together. It was a subtle movement, but distinct. "Secure the room," he ordered his men. "Get a perimeter. Medics check the civilians." He turned back to Martha. "Mamster," he said, his voice respectful, almost reverent. "Command sent us to intercept the Visser group. We had intel they were hitting a soft target to patch up their leader. We didn't know the target was occupied." "I'm retired Lieutenant," Martha said. "Commander," he corrected gently. "Commander James Vance. My father served with you in Beirut. He told me stories about the nurse. He said you once extracted a diplomat from a burning embassy using nothing but a triage kit and a stolen taxi." Martha allowed herself a small, weary smile. "It was a bus, and he wasn't a diplomat. He was a spy, but close enough." "We're here to clean this up," Commander Vance said. "We'll handle the bodies. We'll handle the police. The official story is a gang dispute. You were never involved." "I appreciate that," Martha said, "because I really just want to go to Florida." "Florida is nice," Vance nodded. "But we have a problem." "What problem?" Vance tapped his earpiece. "The Visser group has a second team. They aren't coming by helicopter. They're coming by road. And they just breached the perimeter fence. We're about to have a firefight in the parking lot." Martha looked at the shattered windows. The storm was still raging. "My car is in the parking lot," she said, frowning. "We can get you out the back," Vance said. "No," Martha said. She walked over and picked up the shotgun. Vance looked at her. "Ma'am, that's a 1998 Buick LeSabre with leather seats," Martha said, pumping the action of the shotgun. "I just paid it off. Nobody shoots my car." Vance stared at her for a second. Then a grin spread across his face. "Echo team." Vance spoke into his radio. "Form up on the principal. She's taking point." The scene that followed was surreal for Sarah Mitchell. She watched as her mentor, the woman who knit sweaters for her grandchildren and brought oatmeal cookies on Fridays, walked out into the driving rain, flanked by 6 of the deadliest men on the planet. The parking lot was a chaos of wind and rain. 2 black SUVs had smashed through the chain-link fence and were speeding toward the emergency entrance, high beams blinding. Men were leaning out of the windows, weapons raised. "Contact front!" Vance yelled. The SEALs fanned out, taking cover behind concrete planters and pillars. They moved with a synchronized lethality that was beautiful to watch. But Martha didn't take cover. She walked straight toward her Buick, which was parked right in the path of the incoming SUVs. "Ma'am, get down," one of the SEALs yelled. Martha ignored him. She raised the shotgun. The lead SUV was 50 yards away. She wasn't aiming at the driver. She was aiming at the tire. She led the target, compensating for the speed and the wind. Boom! The front left tire of the lead SUV exploded. The vehicle swerved violently on the wet asphalt. It spun out of control, fishtailing wildly, before flipping onto its side and sliding into a light pole with a massive crunch of metal. The second SUV slammed on its brakes to avoid the crash. The SEALs opened fire. Suppressed fire, thwip, 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 tore into the engine block and the windshield of the second vehicle. The mercenaries inside didn't stand a chance. It was over in 10 seconds. Silence returned to the parking lot, save for the hissing of steam from the wrecked radiators and the relentless rain. Martha walked up to her Buick. She inspected the door panel, a single bullet hole from a stray shot. She sighed, wiping the rain from her glasses. "Deductible is going to be a pain," she muttered. Commander Vance jogged up to her. He checked the wreckage of the SUVs. "Clear," he called out. He looked at Martha, then at the single bullet hole in her car. "We can pay for that, Mom. Black budget. We'll get you a new one." "I like this one," Martha said. "The seats are molded to my back." The rest of the SEAL team gathered around. They looked at the wreckage, then at the little old lady holding a shotgun. One of the younger operators, a massive guy carrying a light machine gun, took off his helmet. He had a bewildered look on his face. "Commander, who is she?" Vance put a hand on Martha's shoulder. "Boys," Vance said, his voice loud enough to be heard over the rain. "You know the training scenarios, the Kobayashi Maru impossible extraction drills, the ones based on the legend of the Nightingale." The men nodded. Every special operator knew the legend. The female operative who disappeared in the 80s, who ghosted through the Iron Curtain, who had a kill count higher than most platoons, but never left a trace. "This is her," Vance said. The men went silent. Slowly the machine gunner stood up straighter. He shifted his weapon to his left hand. He raised his right hand to his brow. A salute. Not a mock salute. A sharp, crisp military salute. One by one, the other SEALs followed suit. There in the pouring rain of a hospital parking lot, surrounded by wreckage and dead mercenaries, 6 Navy SEALs stood at attention, saluting a 64-year-old nurse in wet scrubs. Martha looked at them. For a moment, her eyes misted over. She wasn't Martha the nurse. She wasn't Agent 702. She was just a tired soldier who had finally been recognized by her tribe. She straightened her back. She didn't salute back. Civilians don't salute. Instead, she nodded. A slow, respectful nod of a queen acknowledging her knights. "At ease, gentlemen," she said. "You'll catch a cold." She turned to Vance. "I have a flight to catch in the morning, and I have to feed my cat." "We'll give you a ride, Mom," Vance said. "We'll secure your house. We'll make sure nobody from the Visser group ever bothers you again." "I know you will," Martha said. She handed him the shotgun. "Put this back in the evidence locker, or the lake. I don't care." She turned back toward the hospital entrance. Sarah was standing there, shivering under the awning. Martha walked up to her. "Sarah," Martha said gently. "Martha," Sarah whispered. "Who are you?" Martha took Sarah's cold hands in hers. "I'm the woman who taught you how to start an IV on a dehydrated patient," Martha said. "And I'm the woman who told you that you're going to be a great nurse. That's all that matters." "But," Sarah looked at the SEALs. "They saluted you." "They're polite boys," Martha winked. "Now go inside. Dr. Alston is probably wetting himself. He's going to need a sedative." Sarah let out a choked laugh. She hugged Martha, a tight, desperate hug. "Thank you," Sarah sobbed. "You're welcome," Martha said. She pulled away and looked at the hospital one last time. St. Jude's. It had been a good hideout, but it was burned now. Time to move on. She turned back to the waiting SEALs. "All right, Commander," she said. "Does that helicopter of yours have heated seats?" Vance smiled. "For you, Mom, we'll make it happen." The rain had stopped, replaced by a thick, suffocating fog that rolled off the Oregon hills. The parking lot of St. Jude's Medical Center was no longer a crime scene. It was a sterilized zone. Commander Vance didn't just extract Martha, he initiated Protocol Omega. In the shadowy world of Joint Special Operations, this meant a total site scrub. The local police had been intercepted by federal agents 3 miles down the road. They were told it was a Homeland Security exercise, gone wrong. They were turned back. Inside the lobby, Dr. Greg Alston sat on a plastic chair, a thermal blanket draped over his shoulders. He was staring at the wall catatonic. A SEAL, the one they called Tex, sat across from him. Tex wasn't holding a weapon. He was holding a clipboard. "Dr. Alston," Tex said, his voice terrifyingly friendly. "Let's go over it one more time. What happened tonight?" "Terrorists," Alston stammered. "Mercenaries. They came in. They shot the place up. Then Martha. No." Tex corrected him, tapping the paper. "That's not what happened. What happened was a violent gang dispute between 2 rival cartels. They breached the lobby. They killed each other. You hid in the supply closet. You saw nothing." "But Martha," Alston cried, looking around wildly. "She killed 3 of them. She used an oxygen tank. She's a ninja or something." Tex leaned in close. The smile vanished. "Martha Sterling is a retired geriatric nurse who moved to Boca Raton 2 days ago. She wasn't here tonight. If she was here, and if she did do those things, then the people she was hiding from might come looking for witnesses. Do you want to be a witness, Greg?" Alston swallowed hard. He looked at the bodies being zipped into black bags by men in hazmat suits. He looked at the shattered glass being swept up. I didn't see anything," Alston whispered. "I was in the closet." "Good man," Tex patted his knee. "Your transfer to St. Mary's in Seattle has been approved. Better pay. Fresh start. Consider it a severance package." Meanwhile, by the helicopter, Martha stood by the open door. The rotors were spinning, whipping her grey hair around her face. She had changed out of her bloody scrubs into a spare set of clothes from her locker, a beige cardigan and slacks. She looked exactly like a grandmother again. Sarah Mitchell stood by the landing skids holding Martha's hands. "I don't know how to thank you," Sarah said, her voice trembling. "You saved my life. You saved everyone. You saved yourself, Sarah." Martha said, her eyes crinkling at the corners. "You kept your head down. You listened. That's 90% of survival." "Will I see you again?" Martha hesitated. She looked at Commander Vance, who was waiting in the pilot's seat. "In this life, Sarah, it's better if you don't. Ghosts aren't meant to be visited." Martha reached into her purse and pulled out a small, tarnished silver pin. It was an old nursing pin, but on the back, scratched into the metal, was a tiny symbol, a sparrow. "Keep this," Martha said. "If you ever get into trouble, real trouble, you call the number I wrote on the back of your employee ID. You tell them the sparrow has broken a wing. They'll come." Sarah clutched the pin. "Who are they?" "Friends." Martha smiled. "Family." She climbed into the Black Hawk. The door slid shut. Sarah watched as the helicopter lifted off, banking hard into the night sky, disappearing into the fog. Below, the red lights of the incoming police cruisers finally pierced the dark, arriving 20 minutes too late to see the truth. November 14th, 2015. 1 year later. The official report filed by the FBI regarding the incident at St. Jude's Medical Center was 400 pages long. It was boring, it was bureaucratic, and it was a complete fabrication. The report detailed a botched robbery attempt by a localized paramilitary group known as the Visser Syndicate. It stated that the group turned on each other due to an internal dispute. It listed the casualties: 4 perpetrators dead, 2 in custody, who mysteriously committed suicide in their cells a week later. It mentioned the staff, Dr. Gregory Alston, transferred Sarah Mitchell promoted to head nurse, and a custodial staff member named Martha, who had retired prior to the incident and was not present. But in the basement of the Pentagon, in a room that didn't technically exist on the blueprints, a different file was being updated. File ID Nightingale-702. Status reactivated. General Marcus Thorne sat at his mahogany desk, reading the debrief from Commander Vance. She took out a Tier 1 mercenary squad with a syringe and a bucket of marbles, Thorne muttered, shaking his head. She's 65, Vance. She has arthritis. She has training, sir, Vance replied, standing at ease in the office. Muscle memory doesn't age. The Visser group didn't know who they were walking in on. They thought they were hitting a soft target. They walked into a buzzsaw. Where is she now? Thorne asked. Safe house in Key West, Vance said. She's complaining about the humidity. Says it messes with her hair. And the Visser group. Vance smiled a cold, predatory expression. We used the intel from the leader's phone, the one Martha swiped before we got there. We rolled up their entire network in Europe last night. Accounts frozen, assets seized, operatives neutralized. The Visser group is dust. Thorne closed the folder. She did it again. Even in retirement, she's the most dangerous asset we have. She had a request, sir, Vance added. Let me guess. A medal. No, sir. She wants her pension adjusted. Apparently the administrative error from 1999 never got fixed. She's been short $70 a month for 15 years. Thorne laughed. It was a rare, barking sound. Pay her double. And Vance, sir, send her a cat. She kept talking about a cat. December 24th, 2024. 10 years later. The wind howling outside the glass walls of the newly renovated St. Jude's Medical Center was identical to the sound Sarah Mitchell remembered from that night. It was a low, mournful keen, the kind of sound that rattled the nerves of the uninitiated. But Sarah didn't rattle. Not anymore. At 34 years old, Dr. Sarah Mitchell was no longer the trembling intern who had hidden behind a reception desk while bullets chewed through the drywall. She was the director of nursing for the entire Tri-County medical network. Her scrubs were no longer the generic blue of a novice. She wore a tailored white coat, and her hair was cut in a sharp professional bob. She walked the corridors not with the frantic energy of youth, but with the measured, silent tread of a predator patrolling its territory. The hospital itself had changed. The old brick facade was gone, replaced by steel and impact-resistant glass. The security at the front entrance was tighter-armed guards, metal detectors, ID scanners. The board of directors called it modernization. Sarah knew what it really was, scar tissue. The building had healed just thicker and tougher than before. Dr. Mitchell. Sarah stopped and turned. A young male nurse, Elias, stood holding a tablet, looking terrified. He was fresh out of school, shaking slightly, as the intake alarm blared for a multi-car pile-up on the icy interstate. We have 3 traumas incoming, Elias stammered. Doctor, Reynolds is yelling for a central line kit, but central supply is locked, and I don't have the code and... Sarah placed a hand on his shoulder. Her grip was firm. Breathe, Elias, she said. Her voice was low, cutting through the chaos of the ER like a knife through silk. Dr. Reynolds can wait 30 seconds. If he screams, let him scream. You are the one controlling the room, not him. You are the gatekeeper. Elias blinked, his breathing slowing. I am... Yes, Sarah said. She reached into her pocket, pulled out a master key card and handed it to him. Get the kit. Walk, don't run. Running makes the patients panic, and Elias— "Yes, doctor. Check their shoes." Elias looked confused. "Their shoes." "When the paramedics bring them in," Sarah said, a ghost of a smile touching her lips. "Check their shoes. If they are wet, dry them. If they are cold, cover them. Medicine treats the body, but dignity treats the soul." Someone taught me that once. Elias nodded, galvanized by her calm, and hurried off, walking, not running. Sarah watched him go. For a second, she wasn't looking at Elias. She was seeing herself 10 years ago, and seeing the slumped, grey-haired figure of Martha Sterling pushing a mop bucket, hiding the deadliest skill set in the world behind a facade of frailty. She walked back to her office on the 4th floor. It was a corner office with a view of the dark, swirling storm. She sat at her mahogany desk. On the wall, framed behind UV protective glass, was a jagged piece of a ceramic tile. It was a piece of the floor from the old lobby, scorched by a flashbang grenade. It was the only souvenir she had kept. Her intercom buzzed. "Dr. Mitchell, there is a courier here for you. He says it's a level 4 priority." Sarah frowned. "I didn't order anything." "Send him up." A few minutes later, a man in a grey suit walked in. He didn't look like a FedEx driver. He looked like the men who had come for Martha that night, military posture eyes that scanned the room for exits before looking at her. "Identification," he said flatly. Sarah slid her ID across the desk. He scanned it with a handheld device. It beeped green. He placed a small, heavy parcel on her desk. It was wrapped in brown paper and tied with actual twine, sealed with red wax. "Sign here, ma'am." Sarah signed. The man didn't say, "Have a nice day." He simply turned and vanished out the door. Sarah stared at the package. Her heart began to hammer against her ribs. The return address was blank. The postmark was smeared, but the stamps were foreign. One looked like it was from the Amalfi coast of Italy. Another was a French definitive stamp. She reached for her letter opener, a tactical knife she now kept in her top drawer, and sliced the twine. Inside the paper was a small, polished wooden box. It smelled of sea salt and old books. She opened the lid. Resting on a bed of black velvet was a vintage ornate tea strainer, silver and tarnished with age. Next to it was a small handwritten letter on heavy cream stationery. Sarah's breath hitched. She recognized the handwriting instantly. It was elegant looped cursive, but with the sharp, angular jaggedness of someone whose hands had been broken and healed many times. "My dear Sarah, I trust the winter is treating you well. The humidity down here is murder on the joints, but the olive oil helps. I have been watching your career with great interest. The way you handled the board of directors last spring regarding the nurses' union, masterful. You flanked them. You cut off their supply lines, coffee, and overtime, and forced a surrender. It was a tactical maneuver worthy of the 75th Rangers. I am sending you this strainer because the tea in hospital cafeterias is still a crime against humanity, and you deserve better. Use the loose leaf. Take the 5 minutes. The war will still be there when you finish your cup. I also saw the interview you gave on the news last week about the hospital expansion. You looked tired, Sarah. You are carrying the weight of the world. Remember what I told you in the lobby. You cannot save everyone. You can only save the one in front of you. Don't let the ghosts of the ones you lost crowd out the living. I am moving again. The wind is shifting, and my cat Patton is getting restless. He hates the seagulls. We are going somewhere quiet, where the phones don't ring and the shadows are just shadows. Do not look for me. The agency has closed the file, and officially Martha Sterling died of natural causes in 2018. Let her rest. But keep the pin I gave you. The sparrow is retired, but she still has eyes in the sky. If the wolves ever come to your door again, you won't have to call. I will already be there. Stand tall, Doctor. You are the shield now. With respect, M. Sarah put the letter down her hands, trembling. Tears blurred her vision, hot and fast. I saw the interview you gave last week. Martha was watching. Somewhere in a villa in Italy, or a cabin in the Swiss Alps, the deadliest woman in history was sitting in an armchair with a fat orange cat, watching CNN, checking in on the terrified girl she had saved 10 years ago. Sarah wiped her eyes and picked up the silver tea strainer. It was heavy, solid, real silver. She stood up and walked to the window. The storm was raging outside, battering the glass. The world was cold, dark, and dangerous. There were mercenaries and viruses and storms that could cut the power. But for the first time in a decade, the knot of anxiety in Sarah's chest loosened. She wasn't alone. She pressed the silver strainer against her heart and looked out into the black void of the night. Message received, Mom. Sarah whispered to the reflection in the glass. Message received. She turned back to her desk, picked up her phone and dialed the front desk. This is Dr. Mitchell. She said, her voice steady and commanding, the voice of a woman who had learned from a legend. Code Black protocols are in effect for the storm. Lock the side entrances. Double the guard on the pharmacy. And get someone to bring me a pot of hot water. I have my own tea. Sarah sat back, the silver strainer gleaming under the office lights. The shift was long. The night was dark. But the nurse was on duty, and the sparrow was watching the wind. And that is the incredible declassified story of Martha, the nurse who went to war in a hospital hallway. The Visser group thought they were predators, but they forgot the most important rule of the jungle. Never corner a mother, and never ever underestimate the quiet woman in the corner. Martha Sterling, Agent 702, is still out there, living under a new name, proving that heroes don't wear capes. They wear scrubs and comfortable shoes. If this story gave you chills, do me a favor, hit that like button. It helps the algorithm find more stories like this. And if you want to hear about the time a janitor at the Pentagon accidentally stopped a cyber attack, make sure you subscribe and turn on the notification bell. Share this video with a nurse you know. Let them know we see them, we appreciate them, and we know you never mess with them. Thanks for watching.